Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Revery here, bringing you back another Druid video. In this video, I want to talk about the best class and faction for Druids. We will go over various things that you should think about before rolling one side or the other. I know there's probably a handful of people here who are diehard Horde or diehard Alliance players, whether it's the lore behind the faction, what they stood for, who's on each side, who the war chief or king is, etc. Even though I do enjoy it from a casual perspective, I'm not personally super into the lore or anything. I do agree that these could in fact be reasons to influence someone's decision in choosing a faction, but maybe we can do that in a different video. The stuff I'm going to be talking about is from the Druid class perspective, and how each race and or faction will affect your gameplay, things to think about, what to consider, and so on. We will briefly talk about the micro and macro aspects of this. Now guys, I think it's very important for me to say this as kind of a first major point in this video, because I feel like I need to do my due diligence among the classic community in stressing this before anything. Classic WoW is encompassed by the whole experience. A massive part of that experience is the community within. I'm not going to get super deep into this, maybe in another video as well, but because there's so much that goes into WoW as a whole, I would suggest considering all the factors before choosing. We will talk more about the factions and what they bring later, but right now let's start with the races. Now I'm sure many of you know this already, but Druids in Classic can only be two different races, Night Elf on Alliance and Tauren on Horde. We're pretty limited to what race we can choose to be, which is kind of a downfall of playing a Druid in general. Okay, so each race has different perks and racials that differentiates us from other races, other than looks obviously. Let's start with what Night Elves bring to the table. Nature Resistance, increasing your nature res by 10. Wisp Spirit, which transforms you into a wisp upon death, increasing your movement speed by 50%. Quickness, increasing your dodge chance by 1%, and Shadow Meld. Activate to slip into the shadows, reducing the chance for enemies to detect your presence. Lasts until cancelled or upon moving. Also, specifically for Night Elf rogues and druids, with Shadow Meld, they're more difficult to detect while stealth or prowling. But let's be honest here, dude. As a Night Elf, you get sick glowing eyes, and you can do flips as you spam Moonfire. Like, who wouldn't want that, right? Now let's move on to Taurens and their racials. Cultivation, increasing their overall herbalism skill by 15. Endurance, increasing their total health by 5%. Nature Resistance as well, increasing their nature res by 10. And of course War Stomp, which stuns up to 5 enemies within 8 yards for 2 seconds. So with the racials in mind, ask yourself, what do I want to do with my Druid in Classic? Do I want to become a world PvP god? Be the ultimate duelist? A committed raider? Do I want to gank lobbies all day? The Gathering Lord? Let's break it down between PvP and PvE. I would consider the Wisp Spirit racial to be useful in terms of the quality of life of just playing the game. It's really nice to have that while leveling to reduce the amount of time it takes to run or float back to your body if you somehow died while leveling or got ganked out in the world. Unless you're like me and you try to see if you can race against the time it takes for you to auto run back to your body while you try to sneak a quick bathroom break in. I mean, efficiency is key. And hope to God you make it back before you're across the zone. But in terms of battleground PvP, it's not quite as important since you're just going to get res at the graveyard anyway. Next is the racial quickness. The extra 1% dodge chance from quickness is nice, especially if you're a dedicated bear tank. I don't know how comparable it is to the increased health you get as a Tauren. I'm pretty sure there might be some of you out there that may have crunched the numbers, but if you want to tank as a Druid in Classic, this does help. In terms of PvP, I don't know. I don't think it's super amazing just because it only really works against physical damage, and Druids tend to struggle more against casters in general. Lastly, Shadow Meld. From my personal experience, I really found this to be kind of a pretty underwhelming racial in itself, at least in terms of PvP. I think the biggest value this brought me was being able to eat and drink in stealth, since you can't do it in Forming Classic, but that was pretty much it. I think a different class like Hunter benefits significantly more from this just for ganking potential other than Druids. Or if you're one of those priests and like to mind control the enemy horde off the bridge in AV, which is always fun too. Also, with the increased stealth for rogues and druids with the Shadow Meld racial, it might seem to be pretty helpful maybe on paper, but it didn't really seem to make too much of a difference when I was PvPing in the level 58 Alterac Valley beta. I think the most value you may get from this in PvP is maybe against other stealthies out in the open world or in duel situations. I'm not totally sure how effective the increased stealth may be. Don't quote me on this, but I've heard and read, at least for druids, it's equivalent to about 1 extra point into Feral Instinct. But I will say though, if they do a re-release of the Burning Crusade expansion, Shadow Meld becomes super good for world PvP. Like, super duper good. If I remember correctly, back in BC they changed it. Maybe it was like patch 3.0.2 or something, where they increased it to the 2-minute cooldown, but you could use it in combat. It was like a vanish. And in BC, druids had instant flight form, so if played right, we were virtually almost impossible to kill in world PvP, which is awesome. Now let's move on to Taurens. There may be some value in cultivation. Most of us know that druids are known to be one of the best, if not the best gatherer class with instant travel form in the game, so there's that. Endurance is really nice, and it's pretty self-explanatory. With the overall 5% health buff, it may not seem like much, but anytime you can get any extra health in WoW, it's always a nice benefit. From leveling, to bear tanking, to PvP. And finally, War Stomp. Now I don't want to sound too biased towards this racial, but the reason why it's arguably the best racial for druids is because of its overall utilization and how you can combo this with other druid spells. There's a lot of ways you can use this to give yourself an advantage in a fight, or escape a sticky situation, or my personal favorite, using it on those pesky mobs that daze you off your mount so you can travel form away. Dumb mobs. Let me break it down. First, a couple of spells that I like to combo War Stomp with is Regrowth and Entangling Roots. Because these spells have a cast time of 2 seconds and 1.5 second cast times respectively, making these spells essentially impossible to get interrupted. But like most things, it really depends on the circumstance. If you find yourself in a 1v1 situation, casting Regrowth after War Stomp is a nice way to get off a quick heal and a hot followed right after. Maybe if the enemy gets some nice crits on you or you want to sustain a fight a little bit longer. But in general, I usually prioritize using it for rooting against rogues and warriors, either to create space or bait cooldowns like Vanish and Trinket. I'll also sometimes use it on hunters to get in their dead zone and maybe get a few casts off. There are dozens of ways you can try to get cheeky with it against other classes too, but those are just a few examples. Real quick guys, if you want to check out some examples of this, I have a duel breakdown video against Sony Digital. He's a rank 1 warrior from back in the day, and the duel was from the $7,000 classic beta level 40 dueling tournament. Link will be in the description below if you want to check that out. War Stomp is virtually a free short CC that doesn't cost any mana or the need to switch into form that we can use to either interrupt a CC being casted on us like Fear, or to interrupt to heal for extra pressure. Cycling this with our other CCs such as Feral Charge, Bash, and if you take Engineering, which you should in PvP, Grenades. This can increase our killing opportunity significantly. Our class lacks hard spammable CC like Fear and Polymorph until we get Cyclone later in Burning Crusade. For group fights and BGs, there are just endless ways to use War Stomp. I've used it for stunning multiple enemies to help me escape the flag room in War Stomp Gulch. I've also used it by timing it perfectly around the flag carrier before he or she goes down to clutch flag pickups or returns. In Arathi Basin, I use it to AoE flag nodes if I don't have enough rage to swipe. I don't mean to sound too biased as I mentioned earlier towards this racial, but the amount of utility it has for druids specifically is just undeniably good. Now that we got the racials out of the way, let's talk about factions and how each of them can affect your gameplay experience as a druid. In general, both factions have pros and cons, but from my personal experience, Horde has been overall a little bit more dominant in PvP than Alliance. Let me elaborate more. For PvP, Horde has better racials between each race, and it seems that more PvP oriented players seem to gravitate to the Horde side. I'm not sure why this is. There have been speculations, but that's what I've kind of just noticed over the years of playing WoW. Horde would usually end up winning Warsong Gulch and Arathi Basin more often, but on the flip side, Alliance will win more Alterac Valleys, which kind of sucked for Horde considering how much honor you actually got from winning AVs, and how much of my life I actually spent back in the day doing this. Keep in mind too that I do also remember for Horde, we would tend to get slower queue times in Warsong Gulch and Arathi Basin compared to Alliance. In terms of actual PvP gameplay, out in the world, battlegrounds or duels, nothing is worse than fighting an orc if you're a class that relies on stuns like rogues and druids. Whether you're an alliance fighting them all the time or dueling them on the same faction, it just sucks butt cheeks. You'll find out real quick that orcs have a racial called hardiness, which increases the chance to resist stun effects by an additional 25%. I can confirm that if you fight an orc and they resist multiple stuns in a single fight, it can literally carry them in a 1v1 or a duel.
Fuck these bombs, dude. Fuck these bombs, dude. I gotta believe in auto attacks now. This is literally where I need a bomb. I'm gonna believe in auto attacks. Dodge again! Dodge again! Dodge again! You are so lucky with these dodges, Kuzu. Dodge again! I have not even auto-attacked you a single time. Literally have not auto-attacked him a single time. 8 seconds to watch. 8 seconds to watch. He's gonna get a stealth. I gotta get him in combat. Hodge in 3 seconds. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. Hodge in 1 second. Resist! 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 You've gotta be fucking me! Oh, fuck you! Fucking resist my Hodge! Dodge fucking every auto-attack! That is so bullshit! Oh my god! He's so lucky!
It's actually just insane, and it's been the closest thing that's got me to Summit smashing my monitor. Not actually, but fighting orcs. Also, I'm not the biggest fan of fighting shamans either. I've dueled my fair share in the beta, and when Wind Fury procs, or they get a massive chain lightning crit off, it hurts pretty bad. Not to mention, getting spam purged on all my HOTS. Even though I do like it when they spend mana purging my rank 1 rejuvenations. Teehee. Lastly, in terms of world PvP, it really does come down to server balance and or who may be on your server. Usually world PvP is more of a numbers game more than anything and less about what classes are in the fight. So, yeah. Okay, now for PvE. Alliance takes the cake for druids in this one by a long shot. I mean, in general, Alliance takes the cake for PvE over Horde. The main and biggest reason is because, well, Paladins. Paladins, and I'll say it one more time, Paladins. Now, specifically for druids, since this is mainly tailored for the druid class, is that Paladins provide blessing buffs, such as Blessing of Wisdom in particular and Blessing of Kings. These buffs, among others that they have, are really good depending on your spec during raids. If you're a feral tank, it pretty much negates the endurance racial from Tauren because the King's buff actually ends up giving you 5% more health in the racial, I think. I don't know if it's health or stamina, but something like that. You guys get what I'm trying to say. And for Resto Druid, Blessing of Wisdom is your best friend. It makes your overall healing efficiency just that much better. On top of this, Paladins also bring auras and whatnot, so that just helps the raids in general, which is a nice added benefit. Comparably for Horde, they have Shamans. The biggest thing Shamans bring to raids is Wind Fury Totem. But here's the issue, it does not benefit Druids while in form, therefore it's essentially useless. Imagine though? Imagine if it actually worked. Oh my god. Finally, moving on to some random quality of life things that may affect your experience. I mean, really as any class playing Alliance, the travel times in areas for main cities, most of the main dungeons leveling up, Horde have it a lot easier and less of a travel time to get to. In terms of endgame raiding, Molten Core and ZG are more convenient for Alliance since they are both near Stormwind, but AQ, Nax, and arguably Onyxia, Horde can get to quicker. But personally, I wouldn't let this sway my decision too much when rolling a faction. To wrap things up here, if you guys want a super simplified answer, if your main focus is PvE, I would consider rolling Alliance. If your main focus is PvP, I would consider rolling Horde. But I'm going to reiterate, consider all the possibilities when making the choice. For me, playing with my friends or family is going to add way more fun to my overall classic WoW experience than a racial move, even though I do love Warstomp. Anyway, I hope this information helped you guys out. If you would like to see more, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will be continuing to release more classic WoW content as much as I can until launch. Also, for the record guys, once launch hits, I will be streaming all of my WoW gameplay on Twitch. You can follow my Twitch channel here at twitch.tv/ReveryXD. I will have the link in the description below. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.